Good morning, everybody. This is Michael in the wee hours of the night on the Graveyard Shift with your daily trivia question once again. Happy Friday. Happy payday. Happy Halloween. All that good stuff. Go ahead and get your groovy dance going on because it's the end of the week, and that's what I'm talking about. Feels so good. The answer to the previous trivia question was an era that I have studied many times before, and I love to study and just study the history of it. I'm fascinated with it. It's an era called Prohibition, a period in history in which the manufacture, transportation, and sale of intoxicating liquors was made illegal in this country by the 18th Amendment to the Constitution. This went on for 14 years, folks. It was ratified by the states in January of 1919 and officially went into enforcement on October 27th, which was the focus of the trivia question. Miserable failure. Horrible failure. One of the worst experiments this country has ever undergone, as far as I'm concerned, folks, when you look at the history of things. Fail, fail, fail. The illegal manufacture of alcohol as a direct result of Prohibition skyrocketed. This was an era where bootleggers, a bootlegger occupation, it became an occupation basically. Gang activity ruled as the law of the land. Speakeasies showed up everywhere that you could possibly think of underground. The alcohol content was horribly toxic because it wasn't regulated. It was being made underground, so people were drinking this stuff and literally going blind and dying, actually, in many circumstances. A high percentage of law enforcement, as well as court personnel, judges and so forth, were on the take from gangs and so forth. It was horrible unintended consequences. In fact, Prohibition pretty much set the standard for what unintended consequences meant for something along these lines. It was a horrible failure, basically, and it took 13 years for us to realize back in the day that was the case. The origins of Prohibition, however, go all the way back to the early 1800s, just to give you even more history prior to this era, with what was known as religious revivalism, the growth of temperance movements, perfectionist movements. It even resonated really with the abolitionist type of movement when slavery was an issue pre-Civil War. So it has its history and its origins in and of itself. Different states, I think it was Maine actually was the first state, different states, they actually tinkered around with the idea of Prohibition very, very early on. 1830s, I believe, is what surfaced in my research, setting the foundations for some of the verbiage that would go into the legislation when 1919 rolled around, and we decided to, by way of the 18th Amendment, make alcohol illegal. In 1933, Congress adopted a resolution proposing the 21st Amendment, thank goodness, to repeal the 18th Amendment. And in December of that year, Prohibition finally and thankfully came to an end. And everybody got together, men, women, law enforcement officials, judges, criminals, and we went down to a bar and we had a drink and we all felt better about it. Again, I've studied Prohibition many times, written a couple of papers on it. I love that fascinated with that whole era, that whole 13-year experimental era of illegal alcohol and Prohibition. Highly recommend Ken Burns' video called Prohibition. Really covers it in detail, narrated by Peter Wolf, I believe. Great documentary. You can get it on Amazon in the bargain bin. Check it out. And that brings us to today's trivia question for Happy Friday to wrap this week up for October 29th. On this day in 1929, the New York Stock Exchange crashes in what would be called Black Tuesday, ending an era known as the Great Bull Market of the Roaring Twenties and ushering in an era of economic collapse in the 1930s that would become known as this. Let's rush into the weekend. What? Right off the top of my brain. Did you hear that? That's the way I roll. Have a good day, folks. Thank you for all y'all do. I appreciate you guys more than you can imagine.